Hey, everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into something really interesting today, Indian socialism.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a listener wrote in and sent us some materials, and they're really curious about it.
Okay.
Like what it actually is, how it's different from other types of socialism, why it maybe didn't work out the way people hoped it would, and if there are any parts of it that are still relevant today.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I have to say, just looking through this stuff, it's really different from what I thought socialism was.
Yeah.
It's like this mix of Marx and Gandhi and then India's own, unique situation.
It's really interesting how they tried to kind of adapt those socialist principles to their own specific circumstances.
Right. Like when I saw this term Sarvodaya, this idea of like uplifting everybody, it really caught my eye.
Yeah, that's a core concept.
So let's get into it. What exactly is Indian socialism?
Well, at its heart, Indian socialism was trying to fix the inequalities that are, kind of built into capitalism. So they took inspiration from Marxist ideas about empowering the working class and making sure wealth was distributed more fairly.
Okay.
But what makes it really unique is that they blended in Gandhian principles,
Oh, okay.
which emphasize peaceful change and the well-being of everyone, this idea of Sarvodaya.
So it's not about like class struggle or violent revolution.
Not at all.
It's more about making progress peacefully
Yeah.
and making sure that everybody benefits.
Exactly.
But that makes me wonder, did this unique approach actually work?
Well, that's where things get a little complicated. While it had some noble goals, it didn't completely succeed.
I see.
A big turning point was the economic liberalization in the 1990s.
Oh, wow.
For example, the government drastically cut import taxes, which opened up the Indian market to global competition.
All right.
And that did boost economic growth, but it also caused some domestic industries to shut down because they just couldn't compete.
Yeah.
And that led to more unemployment in some areas.
So it's like a classic trade-off.
Yeah.
Economic growth, but maybe at the cost of making existing inequalities worse.
Right. It makes sense, given that the whole world was moving towards free markets at that time.
Right. But were there other factors, like within India itself, that contributed to its decline?
Absolutely. The political landscape was shifting with new ideologies and demographics.
Okay.
The public sector, which was like the foundation of Indian socialism, started facing criticism for being inefficient and bureaucratic.
Yes, bureaucracy.
Yeah,
I think a lot of us can relate to that frustration no matter where we live.
definitely.
Can you give us some specific examples of how that played out in India?
Imagine having to wait months for basic government services or dealing with endless paperwork just to get a simple business permit.
Oh, wow.
The sources we have talk about cases where social programs that had good intentions got bogged down by these bureaucratic delays and even corruption.
Oh, wow.
And that stopped them from actually reaching the people they were supposed to help.
So it's like the system itself was getting in the way of its own goals.
In a way, yes.
It sounds like on paper, Indian socialism was promising, but in reality, it hit some roadblocks.
Yeah, it did.
I guess some people might see this as proof that socialism just doesn't work. But is that the whole story? Are there any lasting values from Indian socialism that are still important today?
That's a great question, and one we're going to explore further. Even though the system itself might have struggled, the core values it was based on are still relevant in the 21st century. So even though Indian socialism as a system didn't fully work out,
Yeah,
the values behind it,
Right.
they're still important today.
I could see that.
Like the need to reduce inequality and make sure there's social justice, especially in a country with such big economic differences between people.
Yeah. That's a conversation happening all over the world these days.
Yes.
It's not just an Indian thing, right?
No.
It's this idea that economic growth should help everyone,
Yeah,
especially the people who are most marginalized. It feels more urgent than ever.
absolutely. And there's also that focus on decentralizing power, giving more power to local communities, which is a really current idea too.
Right.
It's about grassroots development and people having a say in how their communities are run.
And we can't forget Gandhi's influence on things like sustainable living and helping the most vulnerable.
Yes.
Those ideas are woven into Indian society.
And definitely they're a deep commitment to social justice and compassion.
But here's the thing.
Yeah,
Just wanting equality isn't enough.
right.
What are some actual steps we can take, especially knowing that things didn't work out perfectly in the past?
Well, the materials you sent in suggest a few key strategies.
Okay.
One is the idea of strategic state intervention, where the government steps in to regulate markets and make things fairer, but without trying to control the whole economy.
So like finding that balance
Yeah.
between a totally free market and too much government control. What would that look like practically?
Well, for instance, regulating industries that affect public health, like pharmaceuticals, by setting limits on how much essential medicines can cost or ensuring they meet quality standards,
Right.
the government can balance making healthcare affordable with letting private companies do their thing.
So it's not about dictating everything.
Yeah.
It's more about setting the rules to make sure things are fair and accessible.
Mhm.
Are there other strategies that fit with that?
Another important idea is promoting a mixed economy, which finds that balance between private business and public investment.
Got it.
India's healthcare system is a good example. There's a strong private sector, but the government also plays a big role with public hospitals and programs like Ayushman Bharat.
Oh, yeah, Ayushman Bharat. That's the program trying to provide health insurance to millions of vulnerable families.
Exactly.
Like they're trying to combine this socialist goal of healthcare for everyone
Yeah,
with the reality of a mixed economy.
exactly. And while the program has its challenges in terms of reaching everyone and making it work smoothly,
Right.
it shows how they're trying to use both public and private initiatives to meet these essential social needs.
So finding that balance is key. What other approaches are mentioned in the materials?
Empowering workers is another crucial element. The sources talk about worker cooperatives and participatory economics as possible ways to do that.
Those sound pretty different. Can you explain how those models work?
Imagine a business where the workers are also the owners sharing in the profits and decision making.
Oh, wow.
That's a worker cooperative.
Okay.
It gives workers more control over their livelihoods instead of the traditional top-down structure.
I see.
Of course, making that model work on a large scale in a diverse economy like India has its own challenges.
Yeah, I bet. But it's a really fascinating concept, and it seems to line up with that core value of uplifting everyone, not just a select few.
Mm.
Are there any other strategies that stand out?
Having a strong social safety net is also crucial.
Okay.
Making sure people have access to universal health care, affordable housing, and unemployment benefits. That way, there's a cushion for those who might otherwise fall through the cracks.
That makes sense. But setting up such a strong safety net takes a lot of resources. How can India manage that, especially with its current economic situation?
That's where the discussion about income inequality comes in.
Right.
The sources support progressive taxation, where those who earn more pay a higher percentage in taxes and policies that redistribute wealth to fund these initiatives.
Okay.
The goal is to have a system where those who have more contribute more to support those in need.
So we've got a lot of big ideas here. Strategic intervention, a mixed economy, empowering workers, a strong social safety net.
Yeah.
But if you had to choose just one, to start with the one that would have the most direct positive impact on the average person in India, what would it be?
That's a tough one, but if I had to pick, I'd say investing in education and skills training would make the biggest difference.
Really? That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that would be your top pick. Why education?
Well, think about it. Education gives people power. It fuels economic growth. It creates ways for people to move up in society. It's about breaking those cycles of poverty and giving people the tools they need to succeed in a world that's changing so fast.
Yeah.
Especially in India with its huge young population, this is incredibly important.
Okay, I see your point. It's not just about learning facts. It's about giving people the ability to control their own futures.
Yeah.
But education doesn't exist in isolation. Even with the right skills, people still run into systemic barriers like discrimination and lack of opportunity. How do we address those bigger issues that can hold people back, even if they have a good education?
You're absolutely right. Education is powerful, but it's not a cure-all. We have to tackle those systemic issues head on.
Right.
One area where India has made progress is affirmative action.
Mhm.
You know those policies that try to address caste-based discrimination and make sure marginalized groups are better represented?
So it's about leveling the playing field and making sure everyone has a fair chance no matter their background.
Yeah.
Are there any other strategies for tackling these deep-rooted inequalities?
Another really important area is gender equality. There are these growing movements in India pushing for equal rights and opportunities for women.
I've seen that.
Things like access to education, healthcare, and economic participation, as well as tackling issues like gender-based violence and discrimination.
It sounds like a lot of different approaches are needed. But this all brings me back to something we talked about earlier. India faces these huge challenges: poverty, inequality, discrimination. It can feel really overwhelming. What gives you hope that progress is possible? What are you seeing that suggests these efforts are actually making a difference?
Even with all the challenges, there are so many individuals, communities, organizations across India working so hard to create a more just and equitable society.
I can imagine.
I find hope in their stories, their resilience, their unwavering commitment to social change.
Yeah.
Like I recently read about this grassroots organization in rural India that's empowering women through education and entrepreneurship, helping them break free from poverty and become agents of change in their own communities.
Those stories are amazing. It's a good reminder that even small actions can have a big impact. It's not just about big policies. It's about the combined efforts of everyday people pushing for change.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the legacy of Indian socialism. It reminds us that social change is a continuous process. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
It requires ongoing dialogue, critical thinking, and a willingness to question the status quo. And it's not just about what the government does, it's about how each of us contributes to creating a more just and equitable world.
That's a really powerful message to end on. To our listener who sent in these materials, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of Indian socialism, its complexities, its lasting values, and this ongoing journey to build a more just and equitable India.
And to everyone listening, we encourage you to think about the ideas we've talked about today. How do these principles connect with your own experiences and the challenges your communities are facing? How can we all help create a world where everyone has the chance to thrive?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep fighting for a better world. Until next time.